This might even be still in it. Who cares?
Oh god.
Oh, no. Please no.
That's gotta get cut
That's
out.
going.
It's good stuff.
No, it's not.
No, doll.
Okay, fine.
If that makes it in, I'm quitting the podcast.
That can stay in.
Hello and welcome to the Face Downs, your source for TCG news and all things Yu-Gi-Oh! I'm Lucas.
I'm Ruben.
And I'm Joe.
And we are still in person.
Yeah, after a long week, it's been crazy. We got flooded out, stuck in Palmy. I mean,
Hasn't stopped raining.
yeah, it hasn't stopped raining. Yeah, it's been
Apparently we brought the non-existent rain with us from
sort of a
Auckland.
Noah's Ark situation, and definitely not us just trying to cover up the fact that we did 2 in one night.
And you know what? If we did,
Yeah.
that's called being resourceful.
And this is the second one, so we're going to be real low energy for this.
I don't know about that one. I'm
I'm
having
going to get a
fun.
drink of water. So.
Yeah, go stay hydrated. Take a sip because you absolutely need it right now. But yes, we're here. Did you pause?
I did not pause.
Okay. Me, I just saw you touch the computer and I went, what are you doing, Joe? You're not in person, you can't adjust technology.
I was thinking of it, but I was like, no, we'll keep it raw.
Yeah, so we're here. We've got another episode, and this time we are answering the questions that we have proposed. So over the last couple of weeks, while we've been uploading our episodes and posting them to the Yu-Gi-Oh! Facebook page, we've been asking for some answers to a particular question because we thought it'd be interesting to get some opinions from players on this particular subject.
This is called engagement, and it's very important if you want to be a sellout.
Yeah.
You need more clicks, and if you want to do more clicks, asking questions and getting answers is a great way to do so.
And we love hearing from you guys.
Yeah. So I proposed a question to Ruben, I think, in private as like a fun thought experiment, which is not to think of the most broken cards in Yu-Gi-Oh's history, which are very obvious, like when you watch cross-banner stuff, but to think of cards that when they were printed, it fundamentally changed our opinion or maybe like the trajectory of the game. Because having played a lot of cross format lately, it's very apparent that like the printing of certain cards just made such a huge difference when you compare certain eras. And to start us off, I think one of the main examples we talked about windups being in the event was, in my opinion, Zen Maedi. Was like, I think the thing that was the progenitor of this discussion, because I was sitting there getting really upset that every deck was playing some variation of a Link 2 or a rank 4 or something that just made their entire deck happen, regardless of what started their combo. Because this was Phantom Knight Adventures, just being able to use the Enchantress to make Cherubini, and they didn't have to draw anything else. That's full combo, and that was frustrating me. So I was trying to come to the bottom of what...
I was getting pressed.
Yeah, I was like trying to get to the bottom of like what in Yu-Gi-Oh! Like started this trend, and to me Zen Maedi was the first pseudo-generic extra deck monster that like it didn't matter what you started with, as long as you got to 2 level 3s, you could do something. And then we see Xyz Infernity do that with Lavarval Chain. We see, a trajectory going forward that Yu-Gi-Oh! Was never the same from.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think beginning with Zen Maedi as the discussion here as something that fundamentally or changed the trajectory of the game, it is what made a lot of extra deck mechanics balanced is the fact that they didn't replace themselves. So that's something that you committed 2 into 1. So you were essentially losing a resource. Obviously, you think of things, a good kind of precursor to this, although not nearly as generic, is something like Karakuri Bure and Bure Do. Obviously, when they are synchro summoned, they special summon a Karakuri from deck. So they replace themselves. They mitigate the costs that it is to summon the level 7 or 8 synchros. And where Zen Maedi steps up one further is it simply requires 2 level 3s.
I think that's it for me. Like,
yes.
I do agree that Bure is the first example of this, I guess, coming up in a quote-unquote meta deck, because before that was Teledad, which none of it was actually extra deck extenders. It was all extra deck payoffs. Yeah. Like you said, 2 cards into 1. The payoff is that you get a more powerful card. Whereas with Bure, it's like, well, you get a really powerful card and another body, so it replaced itself. And I think, Zen Maedi was just the first one that's like, I don't need to play tuners. I don't need to be playing machines. I think Bure is like machine tuner and a machine non-tuner or something.
It's not generic. It's not generic.
Whereas windups, you just summon Tour Guide.
Yeah.
And Zodiac format, going forward with MX Saber Invoker, you just summon Terratop. Like, and that's what we're seeing now in Phantom Knight. Is just like, whatever, it's 2 level 3s, full combo, doesn't matter where I start, get to the same end board, and I'm,
I think it's something we discussed a lot, even in like the Boss Monster podcast we talked about, where generic boss monsters have been the problem. It seems to be like every single thing that like changes it is something that is so generic. Like we're seeing now with Adventure Token, like that is literally in like every single deck, and you said there you were upset that like Cherubini is full combo, yet like that Enchantress still like set off your Nan Yan in that game we just had before, and
That
I was
would have
like,
been a Cherubini.
that's unfair, you know. I
You
was
can
like,
play Nan Yan and Phantom Knights. It's
Yeah.
an easy Cherubini. But
So-
of course, Griffin Rider back in the day would have been like a 3-material. You know, like you
Yes.
think about Cosmo Blazar Dragon was a 3-material, hard to make synchro with the same effect as Griffin Rider. So
Yeah.
Yu-Gi-Oh's definitely gone down a trajectory where getting to these boss monsters has gotten easier and easier. So the fact that there's also like Draco back that's a +1 from doing this whole engine is just ridiculous. And so we posed the question, and we got quite a lot of responses. We came up with some of our own as well. We can pepper into the discussion. Maybe like, you know, you guys do one, then I'll say one of the fan ones. Maybe work
I mean, I
out
feel like
what-
we got a lot of fan ones. I'd
do
love
have a
to.
lot of fan
I'd
ones.
love to hear what you guys
well,
have to say.
We can get straight to the meat, I guess.
Yeah.
And start here with Marshall, recent card merchant devotee.
Manager.
Manager,
Of the
yes.
Card Merchant Hamilton store. So please be sure to head to that store
Mr.
to check it
Stevenson,
out.
You know what I'm saying?
To check out the latest store
Mr.
that's
Mansion.
offering Mr.
Probably shouldn't say his full name constantly on the podcast. It's fine.
Mr. Marshall.
Mr. Marshall.
Mr. Marshall.
And he gave us 2 examples of cards. One of which I think is like I think he really understood the question. And then the other one is a little bit more specific. But his first one was Cyber Dragon Infinity as the first quote unquote generic Omni. And I think this is totally one of these cards. I mean, do you guys agree?
I think so.
Totally.
I mean, the fact is, like, you can go into a Ptolemaeus.
3 level 4s.
3 level 4s. It was pretty easy in Pendulum. Like,
Yeah.
most of it, some of it could do it too, but like,
Tellarknight.
I don't know. But like, you know, like the fact that it didn't require like any specific level
Yeah.
4, and then Ptolemaeus itself didn't. It just summoned an Infinity for free. Like it had no synergy, like actually with that card.
Often like
outside of that.
before your
Yeah.
Pendulum summon in Pendulum, so like it would eventually be replaced like as a thought, but
Yes.
at first it was kind of your catch-all, you know, it was what,
functions-
Bosch, right?
Yes.
So same set as
Yeah.
Pepe.
It very much it functions the same way as Griffin Rider does now.
Yeah.
Where you do it first, and then it allows you to enable your payoff. Like and I guess it was a problem back then. We saw Ptolemaeus obviously got banned in the end.
Yep. Still is.
Infinity obviously is still around at 3 or 4. So 3 or 4.
3 or 4. If you run 4,
Yeah,
DM
three,
me.
yeah,
You're on another level.
Yeah. You know what I mean, though.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, I guess it was maybe Ptolemaeus more of the problem in that situation.
I think
but
so.
Yeah, I agree with Marshall where it was the first Omni Negate that I can remember as well.
I mean, not to mention that Cleese could make it like as a little engine in Metal Foes. You know,
Yes,
you just overlay
yeah.
the 2 monoliths or the Scout monolith to. That was kind of cute as well.
Yeah.
But I think where this is different from maybe Griffin Rider and like the Zenmaedi thing is this was a commitment. And I think this is a lot closer to where we saw Borrowload Savage Dragon in Hulk format, where it just ended up being like the best thing you could be doing. Very much like Cyber Dragon Infinity, that was the whole point in like, you know, you could either play Galaxy Soldier or the Monolith Scout stuff. You could play, you know, Shave Force like in Raid Raptors to get into it. And like there were just so many different random ways decks were making this because like it was better than what their deck could do.
Yes.
Yeah, it just was so accessible as well. Like I think of even at the time when that structure deck came out, like when the Cybernetic or the Cyber Dragon Revolution or the whatever the one that was that gave us actually Nova and Core, like it actually made Cyber Dragons a thing.
Yeah, it was a good deck.
Because you
Still
could
is.
machine dupe your Cyber Dragon cores, put out 2 5s, Nova play, and then go into an Infinity.
Yeah.
So it actually was a really legitimate strategy. You're right with Galaxy Soldiers. I think that was obviously like World Superstars.
Yeah.
I think, Infinity is a very interesting design, and I think
Yeah.
definitely has paved the way for the quote-unquote generic Omni Negates.
I think it definitely did pave the way and set a trajectory towards like that's what you're doing now in Yu-Gi-Oh. Like if you not like, what's the point of making Draco Berserker or like the Magic Key Synchro or your archetypes rank like level 8 Synchro when you can make Borrowload Savage Dragon?
It seems to be now as well. You need to like older kind of Omni Negates are kind of already outdated. Like I know I was looking at Drytron builds post ban list, and like people were like off the what's that new Magic Key Omni Negate because it's
The
like,
unlocking.
It requires 2 cards to set it up.
Yeah.
Whereas like things like Griffin Rider now, like even Infinity, didn't really require
just
much
free.
setup. It's just
Yeah.
free. It's there. Like and
There's no way to disrupt it. Like even Infinity Barrier, one of the most famous counter traps, like if you beat over the Archfiend, is turned off.
yeah. So yeah, I agree with that one.
And then Marshall also gave us another example of a card. This one I don't get like the trajectory argument, but he does make an argument that it's really powerful and like defined its format was Wavering Eyes. He says released in a special edition for Cross Souls as a premiere for the next set core. Missed when they did these one card drops. TBH, yes, I really liked like Called by the Grave. I remember Aruha was like. Oh, Sarama was like a pre-release one. The Marincess stuff.
I remember back in the day, Light and Darkness Dragon was one of those sorts of packs.
It was in like a special edition,
like a Twilight edition or something.
They don't seem to be doing any of those sorts of promo pack things anymore.
Yeah, just in like reprint sets, and it's like a rarity reprint thing.
Promos in tins as well. I miss those too.
Oh, I miss those. So just even I love promo packs.
Promo packs,
the little plastic.
Very cool. Yeah.
Anyway. At the moment of release, it saw play in the only viable pen deck Cleafort and completely changed to the Pendulum Mirror. This went on until eventually it got banned after toxic interaction with Plushfire and reducing a mirror match to whoever resolves Wavering Eyes on their opponent's scales wins.
Yeah, and Chain and Wavering to Wavering became a thing.
Well, it's also like people obviously Wavering Eyes for 2 is really powerful. Wavering Eyes for 4, you just search another Wavering Eyes.
Yeah,
you search another Wavering Eyes, you banish a card on the field, you search a Pendulum card and deal 500 damage.
Yeah.
That's nuts for a quick play spell. A quick play spell as well.
I guess the argument you can make for this in a trajectory sense was in the idea that like Konami was going to start printing cards that in like the mirror or particular matchups were just like these stupidly powerful blowout cards. Like I guess I think now of Harpy's Featherstorm.
I think even just a touch earlier than that, something like Dimensional Barrier. You're like, okay, here's an entire mechanic that we're going to insulate. Cards. We're gonna give people like basically a fire blanket for interruption.
But I guess in terms of trajectory, there were a lot of hose cards. They love printing hose cards. Like
they do.
Gravity Collapse or non-fusion area, Shadow Imprisoning Mirror. Like I think there have always been cards that are like ridiculous.
I think
in this sense, Wavering Eyes obviously like plussed you as well. It's like it's not as strong.
Yeah, it was like interaction and interruption that generated advantage.
It kind of functions not the same way, but similarly to what I saw today with Fate, like a stacked effect. You know, that you can kind of like the more you have, the better it is. And I feel like these cards have been around for a while, so the whole like it changing the way it was, maybe not so much, but it was huge for an archetype. Like not an archetype, like a type in. So like for Pendulum, that one card literally defined that format. So like it's more of a definitive card for a format rather than like
a demonstrative card for like a future trajectory.
Exactly.
Yeah, I agree. But I think like made good points. The Infinity argument is very strong.
Yes. All right,
then,
what do we have next?
Liam Garrity commented, one that's not so obvious would be the Dragons Collide structure deck from 2012, Light Pulsar, Dark Flare, Eclipse Wyvern. 3 of those structures and a few cheaper staples could build you a very competent deck in 2012 in a format that desperately needed more diversity, as the top 3 decks, Rescue Rabbit, Insector, and Windup, were not very enjoyable to play against. While other good structures came up before it, they were either much lower power level or required a much bigger money investment past the structure deck. So IMO, it was the precursor to structure decks like Monarchs and Salamangrade. And I'm an honorary chuck in Dark World there too, because it was sort of the same era. Maybe the era in which Konami started to work out how to do structure decks.
Yes, because you think of like previous structure decks. I mean, we've literally done an entire episode of it. The first kind of like iterations of structure decks were just like big bungus.
It was like
big
reprint
smacks,
kind of.
And it was DN staples. Then you got something like Lost Sanctuary, which introduced like the agent support. So like Earth, Hyperion. You're like, okay, I can see a semblance of a strategy.
And that was where they started to print new cards that were like not just boss monsters and payoffs, but also cards that got you there.
Yeah.
I think was a big deal.
And so I think your best example of something that was very impactful would have been the Dark World structure deck as something that
I
really...
think Liam's right. I think this too.
Oh, agreed. Because the thing is that they're very similar time.
Very close time frame,
Yes.
But yes, Light Pulsar, Dark Flare, incredible. Special Summoning from Grave is something that I feel like is really interesting. And then obviously Eclipse Wyvern's dual effects of being able to banish to then get your thing if it's banished is just so powerful. I believe this is also the same time as, Red MD was a jump promo. That was...
Potentially.
So, yeah.
It's funny because I played against this at the multi-format event.
Today,
Well, last week. In Palmy, because we've been trapped here for a week, Joe, obviously.
Oh, yeah, floods.
Yeah.
And very much like, seeing this deck in action kind of made me realize, like, this was one of the first, quote-unquote, like, degenerate combo style decks where it wasn't necessarily consistent, but it just had access to, like, if you mill Eclipse Wyverns, and he was playing Dragon Rulers, but, you had the Light Pulsar and Dark Flare Chaos Dragons, plus eventually you had Shadow Spectres introduce Wyverburster and Collapse Serpent to this engine, it's very degenerate when you just like mill 2 Eclipse Wyverns, get 2 JDs, add them to your hand, summon both of them, pop the entire field. Like, that feels ridiculous.
And obviously, there's like you still had like a BLS was running around in this format as well, so you would still have a BLS
in 2012.
It might be banned then. I'm not. I couldn't say.
I know it got banned.
No, it would have been
it came
because
back,
it came back from one because you could play it in Piper Chaos. This is also we're going to shout out
as well.
good friend Thomas. This is, I believe, Thomas's most competitively successful deck.
think so, yeah.
And I believe it was legitimately 3 structure decks and maybe some pieces that you stacked from outside.
Yeah,
It's really cool. And I think Liam's right. This is like a precursor to
modern dragons, I would say.
modern dragons and modern structure decks. Like
Yes.
that format defining kind of new structure deck release that introduces broken cards.
Yeah, I mean, you literally think like Monarchs is the one that you can just pick up 3 literally and play the game and get a Karaz. When Dino Smashers came out, it was actually just 3 and find the old Dolkalagi as if you needed them. So yeah, this is a really good example of like your core engine is in basically what in New Zealand is a $60 New Zealand worth of product, and you find maybe 5 to 10 cards to sprinkle out, and then you cater your side deck to what you need.
In terms of like trajectory though, like what the actual Chaos Dragons represented, Joe, do you think there's anything like
I think
you can pick out?
I think
abuse.
Yeah.
Just
I mean, we're still seeing some of those Chaos Dragons. Like, I know later on we had the baby dragons, and they are still being used in Dragon Link.
I guess not once per turn.
Not once per turn effects.
Stuff
like
really starting
grave
to crop up.
abuse, grave setup,
Dark Matter.
like it was the precursor for
Should we just say dragons?
just dragons. Like,
This really heralded the fact that
literally, like-
dragons were going to be pushed forever.
I remember back in the day, the only thing dragon I really thought of was like Masked Dragon.
Yeah.
Or like,
Yeah, sure.
just, I'm Dragon level
Tyrant
3.
Dragon.
I'm Dragon
Yeah.
level 5.
Blue Eyes,
Blue Eyes, yeah, sure. But like,
The ultimate power engine of
wasn't-
destruction.
ever like a really, really big dragon deck beforehand. Yeah. I suppose that this did set the path for that. So, yeah.
Yeah.
It kind of set the power, not so much for a design perspective, but for the fact that Konami was just going to have a hard-on for dragons for like a decade.
Literally to this day.
Oh, no.
Yeah,
this
it's
day.
still going. Well, the recent Albers fusion maybe says that they're moving on from that toxic X.
Battle of Chaos is a whole bunch of Blue Eyes support, so
That's true.
you better get into it.
All right, someone on Twitter, I don't know their name, they just go by T, but they do like a lot of my posts, so I hear
Thank you, T.
They just simply said Ash Blossom and 50% of the secret rares from Raging Tempest. Ash Blossom is a hand
Kind
trap.
of,
I don't know. It is definitely like the modern hand trap.
I
my
think it
opinion.
was like it was the upgraded design. Like you think of the Ghost Girls that prefaced it, they were very conditional. Ogre is obviously the first one, and there was like cards or effects that activate on field. So a bit conditional. And then even your next one after that was Winter Cherries, and that was conditional. Your opponent had to control more monsters, and it only interacted with a card and extra deck that you also had to have.
Actually, I do think there is something really important about Ash Blossom. It is the first modal hand trap ever printed. And I think because we use Ash so much, we forget that it's a modal card. Because it negates 3 different kinds of effects.
Yes.
And before Ash, we never had a hand trap that literally could negate one of 3 different things. It was
And
always
all the
a
most
thing.
important things as
Yes.
well.
Add from deck, summon from deck,
Send
or
from deck.
send from deck. Those are all very different things. I'm so used to ashing stuff that you forget it is modal. And then we got Ghost Bell, and then nothing since then that does the same thing. So if anything, this kind of prefaced the fact that Konami was like, whoa, whoa, no, this was way, way, way
I mean,
too
again, like
strong.
we've spoken about it. I'm sure the statistic is updated, but at the time of when we last spoke about it, Ash could negate effectively 1/5 of all cards in Yu-Gi-Oh.
It was a fifth of cards, like 2,000 of the cards in Yu-Gi-Oh could be negated. And you can make the argument that Ash Blossom is still the strongest hand trap, has
appears,
never been power crept. It's the only quote-unquote auto-include that I start with in every deck.
And if you don't play it, it is a bad format.
Kind of.
It is like a harbinger of
Yeah.
this doesn't do enough.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely, maybe we're like yet to see the trajectory that Ash creates, because we've only seen a couple hand traps printed since then, and they've been really weird.
It's kind of hard to like print a better hand trap. Like,
Yeah, and we've had, like-
it's
I
really
don't
hard
think
to-
they can.
I mean,
I actually don't think they
Bahalutia,
can.
Miradora, we've had like random things
Maxi
pop up.
would be one that, like, but that's
Yeah.
not. It doesn't function the same way as Nash Blossom. It's
It's
more
a
of
floodgate hand trap,
it's
like
a floodgate
Droll,
hand trap.
yeah.
It's a hey, you do this, or whatever,
Yeah.
or you can choose just not to do anything. And then Ash is a stop. It's a no. It's a
And then 50% of the secret rares from Raging Tempest. I actually think Dryden and the Zodiac engine deserves a mention.
yes. I do too.
It's the first engine that gave us Link 1s.
It broke a mechanic.
Yes. Yes.
It is literally Link 1s. Like, that is the entire mechanic.
I would say the other one that sort of semi-broke mechanics beforehand would maybe be Necros, in a way where Kaleidoscope allowed you to then ritual summon
Without paying cost.
Whoa, and
paying
Sure
cost.
Yeah.
Sure.
Fusion from
And
deck.
sure, yeah. So there have been instances of this.
Yeah.
The most recent one, which I can compare to Zodiac, would be Tri-Brigade has broken the link mechanic. You literally link from your graveyard, which is
It's
not
dumb.
how link summoning works.
It's way overpowered. But I think, like, we saw Thunder Dragon had the exact same model as Zodiac, and they had to put restrictions on Colossus barely. But,
Well, it became conditionally summonable. There is no condition to summoning any Zodiac extra
but
deck
the whole
monster.
point of it is, like, Salamangreat got Balinks, full comboed off of that.
Yes.
Link 1s are broken. And Zodiac, I think, were, like, the progenitor of the Tier 1 Link 1 deck.
Yeah.
Because we had Mermaid, Tidra, so many decks were just starting to pop up after this that they were just using this design space.
The entire Sky Striker archetype.
Yeah, the entire Sky Striker archetype. But the design space was like, normal summon a monster, that's my extra deck access. And I think that was what was really insane about Zodiac.
It's crazy because if you tell a new player, what XZ summoning is, you get 2 monsters on field, you overlay one on the other, and you put the other monster on top. And then they go, what about that one? Why have you only got one underneath it? And you're like,
They cheated.
yeah, they just kind of said you could do that. And like,
There's so many examples in Yu-Gi-Oh! In which you can legally cheat.
yes.
Like, you have to use polymerization to summon fusion monsters, but some of them you don't.
Yeah.
It's like, why? Why do we just get to cheat
You can just
sometimes?
contact fuse, which is just like not a term that's ever been officialized by Konami. But you
think
just go, like, oh, I guess I'll just summon a Cyber Dragon and use all 4 of your machines to make a fortress.
It's like someone at school, like in the schoolyard, was doing something to you, but it's illegal.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, if I summon my Cyber Dragon, I can make a big guy with all your guys. And you're like, that's not true. And you're like, no, it's actually how this works.
Yeah.
And I think the same rings true for Zodiac. Like, the 1 card extra deck access is, I think, something that they...
Super defines
Overlooked.
modern Yu-Gi-Oh!
It potentially is just something that, like a mechanic that really can't come back without a
They
lot
still
of
do it.
restrictions.
Tri-Brigade is literally that.
They can still make
It's-
a Zeus, and it kind of, I guess it kind of prefaced Zeus as well, like, and these cards that you can just
Slap on top.
Slap on top.
Yeah,
I guess-
Drill Driver, Vespanado, just...
I mean, you had Downed before this. It
You
was
had
kinda-
Downed, yeah, but I mean, Downed's okay. Like, Zeus is like a whole
Yeah,
new level.
Downed was just like an out to like... It's like a thing to slap on your Dante or something.
But I remember when I first saw them come out, and you could just see like an XZ's just stacked with material,
Yep.
and they just literally just kept slapping cards
Yeah.
on top, and I'm like, that's not fair. That's not cool.
It is pretty satisfying.
It is cool, but like, it's not for like a gameplay standpoint.
It's weird that they sometimes just... And again, Tri-Brigade is exactly that for link
Broken
summoning.
mechanic, yeah.
And they just probably shouldn't like...
Drytrons using attack to summon ritual monsters
another
instead of
example.
levels.
Using Xyz material as ritual material is
one
ridiculous.
We haven't seen change. I correct me if I'm wrong, but a synchro. Has there been any decks
Sword
that
Soul.
it's not really broken it because you're still making a tuner and a non-tuner. There's nothing yet to do like something that goes against the grain.
I mean, it's like a Sark
Nyan
deck.
Nyan?
Yeah, a Sarctic.
Maybe Nyan Nyan coming back and making itself a tuner. Yeah,
Yeah. I
Card
think we've
again.
had access to like variable tuners for
think
a long time. I think
Synchro
Sword
and-
Soul is the quote-unquote Zodiac synchro deck
Yeah,
because
okay.
you just normal Moye, you get a synchro without having to commit any other cards from your hand.
That makes
Is
sense. Yeah,
pretty close to what it feels like to make a Zodiac monster.
yeah.
All right, and that was all of the like fan submitted ones. I'm pretty sure, unless you guys got any specific.
Did we see any on the post?
Those were the ones from the post. So
Okay.
I'll check the email
I
really
think there
quick.
was a couple more, but
But yeah, I don't know if we anything else. I think one that I spoke about that we were discussing, and I think one that rung true in our boss monsters discussion is just the term unaffected.
Yeah, so you brought up Apocryphal Towers as your first.
Yeah, that's kind of
your example,
my
yeah.
example of things that fundamentally change the game. Yeah, I think the term unaffected is just maybe even like paring it back even further. I think that it was probably incorrect to apply that particular term onto a Yu-Gi-Oh card. I think that it also was a situation where it might have just been too accessible. Like maybe if they made it basically unsearchable in Cleese, then sure. But I don't really think that this is I don't really think that it's something that I think maybe I don't think it should have been printed.
Well, I think you say it's accessible. Obviously, it was only playable in one deck.
No,
I
but
think what you're really looking for is that it was, how do I say? It was easily like summonable in its own archetype. But the really defining factor was the fact that it was like either you have it or you don't. Became like the mantra of the format. It didn't matter how well you played. Like you could go absolutely ballistic, like full value engine, like through a Burning Abyss play.
Yeah.
And if you weren't playing the Outer Towers, you literally
You just
couldn't do
lost,
anything.
yeah.
Like
It changed deck building, and I guess
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
what the trajectory was.
And that's a really good example.
And this was before Kaijus came out, like in like Sincerity. You had Volcanic Queen and Lava Golem and stuff like that. But
Yeah.
you didn't have access to just like super easy outs to towers like you
Exactly
did
that.
later on with Masterpiece. And in fact, the Kaijus almost feel like
Answers.
they were like a response to everyone going, I hate outing towers.
Yes.
They're like, here you go.
Here's something.
We're never going to print a card that can't be tributed and is unaffected by cards. So,
Yet.
yes, I know. See whatever else they give B Troopers as a fusion monster.
Yeah, and I think that Towers, I know we discussed it in the Boss Monster podcast. It was kind of the first of its kind, and
It absolutely
there
was.
have been more since. We've had
Masterpiece,
Masterpiece,
Ultimate Falcon. I put Dragoon as well because Dragoon, while it
it's a
doesn't.
build around. I mean,
yeah.
not a build around, but you had to put something in your deck to like be like, well, if a Dragoon's a thing, here's a card.
How often have you built a deck and gone, do I have a Dragoon out?
Yeah.
Yeah, when it was at a
Constantly.
height of popularity, you had to have one.
You played Sky Striker. Like, you know exactly what it's like to just need to have a freaking Dragoon
Final
out.
Sigma, a great example. You're just like, that's
Yeah.
a 12 I can't touch. Yeah.
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 Final Sigma is a good example of that as well.
So, yeah, Apocryphal Towers definitely was one of those cards that, like, you know, it got printed, the whole of the game changed and, like, kind of formed around it. Because it was not very long afterwards we saw decks, you know, that sort of built themselves on similar principles. Like, in my argument, Necros sort of built a similar kind of deck with Jin, where it's just like, you can't use the extra deck, my guy's 2300, you know, I
have a Trish to
I have
protect it.
protection for it.
And I have a Valkyrie.
Sort of
and
like a build your own
Valk to-
towers, but it was a similar concept.
And the fact you could reduce the attack as well.
Yeah, like,
Yeah.
how is
it
that not the
was-
same
it
as
was
just going towers pass in some ways?
It was.
And then Monarchs had, you know, Vanity's Pass with Domain up.
Yeah.
And then,
I
you know,
guess even-
Masterpiece was after that. And, like, so many decks after
Yeah.
this just had the same game plan.
Similar, I guess the same could be said about Winder as well, because you
Yeah.
you need to like have, like if there is a format where it's everywhere, you kind of have to be like, well, how do I out Winder? I need something.
But
in the
but the
deck.
difference is Winder could be outed by cards
could
you
be,
would
yeah.
play for other
Naturally,
cards.
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
Chalice was not a bad card to play
Exactly
for any
right,
deck.
You
So, like,
would still be on the one Book of Moon.
yeah. Whereas Towers is like, Chalice does nothing, Book does nothing.
You literally
Yeah.
need a specialized card. I remember Tackle Crusader and a couple of other weird cards being like teched in around that time as well.
That was for the window.
Yeah.
And then obviously the most infamous Towers out was the Diamond Crab King.
I think
which actually came
camera
out-
Clops as well, might have been. So used at some point. Camera Clops.
Camera Clops?
Yeah, I believe.
I mean, I feel like I've heard of that for the Windows out. But yeah, in terms of Diamond Crab King, that was something that was made that was super inaccessible
Oh
for
no,
like
this
a
is
year.
just like the worst construct ever.
Yes.
When this card attacks a face-up monster in the field at the start of the damage step, destroy that monster. Its defense must be higher than this card's attack to activate him. This card sucks.
It sucks. I think it was used at some point. Someone message in, tell me what.
Yeah, why do
Please
people
let
play
us know when
camera
people play
clubs?
camera clubs.
Follow-up episode on camera clubs, actually. We'll do a
Yeah.
whole hour.
They should do a whole thing on cameras, actually. There's a lot of camera
Yeah.
stuff in Yu-Gi-Oh!
Yeah.
And Joe, you brought us a couple as well. Things that we were just talking about that you thought like really changed the format or like trajectory of Yu-Gi-Oh.
Yeah. So I have a tour guide on mine, and tour guide was kind of the first card that like gave you another card on field just for a normal summon. And
Generically,
and the fact that it kind of shows that, I mean, how powerful that is, where the fact that same card is still used today, maybe not so much now with Ventura tokens been around and the fact you can't use it, but I feel like it was the preface for a really good normal summon, similar to Stratos in a way, but the fact that it then gave you board presence to move on and extend your plays. There hasn't, I suppose I don't know what it would go on to then become, but I just remember that card standing out.
I don't think
and-
it's
and
been
it was-
power crept.
I don't think it has, and I know that I remember feeling a sense of the game had shifted a little bit when that card came out. I remember it being like this big, expensive secret rare
Yeah.
that I couldn't afford, and anyone who was using it against me just absolutely swarmed the field way faster than I could and won the game. And I like, you needed tour guides to play.
I mean, I guess the metric I would go by is look at the best decks of the format right now. Tri Brigade, you summon them, you get a link monster. They've essentially gone. Your normal summon has netted you one card on field. Sword Soul, you get a token. Your normal summon has netted you a card on field. Tri-Brigade Lyrilisk at its peak, you know, you would special the turquoise to get a Cobalt. You know, all of these cards were just like tour guides, essentially, in that like everything you summon should summon something. Yeah. And I think Tour Guide, while, you know, not quite that good, like the decks would normally go Tour Guide Sangan Pass when it came out, and then later on it became Tour Guide Sangan Overlay.
Yeah.
You weren't necessarily popping off. I mean, windups definitely could. But, you know, the whole concept of like, if I'm going to spend my normal summon, it better get me something.
Yes. Yeah.
While Stratos was the original, this one very much added to that in like, my board needs to be 5 monsters with 12 negates. You know, that's where we ended up now. And I think Tour Guide is the start of that, where it's like, everything I do needs to get me another thing, so I can make another thing, so I can make another thing.
Yeah. And I guess we'll lead on with that to your one, being Stratos.
Yeah, I mean, who can ignore... I'm the hero player, obviously. But who can ignore Stratos as... I think it is the first Stratos.
Yeah.
And we use that term very loosely to define cards that go +1. And Alistair is a Stratos, you know.
Deneb's a Stratos.
Deneb's a Stratos, and
there is so many Stratos. There's like almost every archetype these days
think
has
what,
a Stratos. Yeah.
What really immediately shot Stratos into contention was the fact that it had a high attack stat and it went +1, which at the time of printing meant that it traded so well with cards like Raigeki Break, cards like Mirror Force, cards like Dark Hole, cards like, you know, removal spells, Smashing Ground. You play all these removal spells because you need to deal with your opponent's monsters, but every time you summon Stratos, they get another Stratos. It's like an endless conga line of dudes. And then obviously that evolved later on into card selection. Stratos wasn't searching itself, it was searching copies of Malicious, or, you know, later on in Omni Hero it would search Faris, and very much like, it became that your deck needed a guy, or a girl, or whatever. Sometimes it's a weird monster. But something that you can summon that then gives you a card selection, gives you access to a, again, modal opportunity to pick up different cards for different situations. And like playing Tellarknights last week at the multi-format event, you know, the choices you have between Altair, getting Altair sometimes.
Vega sometimes, maybe?
Vega sometimes, but, you know, mostly Altair. But,
Vega when I've got Altair.
Sometimes you do want to grab Sirius or Rigel or Proteus, I think, is the one that outed Winder back in the day.
Yes.
It could gain 500 attack. So, you know, that whole idea of like, I summon a thing, not only does it go +1, which some cards did in the past, it lets me choose what I'm going +1 with. It lets me craft my hand so that it becomes combo.
I think, I don't know if we have this one written down or not, but it's similar to how Rota functions. Like every archetype has the Rota, and it digs for the, like...
It's the Rota to Stratos to Tour Guide pipeline. Of like, we just keep getting power creeps on.
Exactly, yeah.
And I mean, eventually we'll have... I mean, Tri-Brigades kind of feel like the power creep Tour Guide, where it's like normal summon from extra deck for free.
Lyrillist Burkle would be the one in most modern time that I've seen
is insane.
Change a little bit, like to now you can add a card, and if you have another one, you can special, you know, as
it's
well,
kind of
which
Rota Tour Guide in a way.
Is nuts. Like so Stratos though, I remember just being like back in the day, like a good card, and it's probably one of those cards like Tour Guides where you can still play them today, and it still functions.
If your normal summon isn't at least a Stratos,
you
should change your normal summon.
Yes.
At very least, it should be something that Stratos is. At best, it's something that Tour Guides.
Yes.
And only a few decks, I think, are allowed access to that. Like, they gave it to B-Troopers because insects are so weak, but...
Gone are the days of set Mystic Tomato. And
well, they can't really do it for Warriors, except they did. But...
And listen, if your normal summon isn't Stratos, you should be banishing Water Enchantress from hand instead.
That's true, Why not both, you know?
Yeah.
You can still get away with stuff.
So another one that I think I put, or we discussed as well, was Emergency Teleport.
Funny. We're all cards are special from deck.
Yeah, cards are special from deck.
Ash Blossom is so good.
Yeah, crazy. It's almost like Ash is really strong. Emergency Teleport was an interesting one. Duelist Genesis, obviously. This is the very first Synchro era set. And Emergency Teleport simply reads, special summon 1 level 3 or lower Psychic from your hand or deck, but its banishment leaves the field.
To tuners and Synchro in general, right?
So obviously this single card enabled the deck known as Taladad. Because that was the teller of the dad. And this obviously then transitioned into things like Dad Return, where if you were to banish your sidekicks off the cost or off the resolution of Emergency Teleport, they could just come back. So I think this was an interesting card in design because it removed how we've discussed like Stratos is your sculpting and card advantage, Emergency Teleport is board presence. It's a card that takes something from deck and puts it on board for no additional cost.
I think you wrote down it bypassed special summon.
Yes.
As being special.
Because I think, like...
It used to be special, and then this card changed that.
You think of, like, notable special summons before around that time. Maybe your Lumina effects when you would discard to summon, or if you milled a wolf, a monster reborn, a Call of the Haunted, a premature burial.
I still consider, like, outside of Monster Reborn, like, the Lumina thing, like, that's still a special summon. Like, it's something that requires a normal, a discard, and graveyard setup, and then you sometimes get a thing back.
Yes.
Like, that feels to me very much like a reasonable, and obviously, like, polymerization into a fusion monster. That's a lot of effort.
You're committing to those resources, whereas Emergency Teleport just kind of mitigated any resource requirement for board presence.
Yeah, for sure.
And then obviously it continued to be good. It came back to 3 and immediately saw success in the Cosmo format, where they printed a lot of really powerful level 3 or lower psychics.
And it's funny because in that era, it went from being like, Teledad just played it because it gave you turn 1 access to a synchro, which was considered very powerful. And then you get to Cosmo, and it's like, no, the strong part is that
Tin Can,
it lets you effectively tutor a monster. It's like your 4th, 5th, and 6th copies of Tin Can, right?
Yes.
And that started to matter more, is like, what are you getting off of E-Tele?
One thing I've noticed is we're actually kind of almost heading back to the original usage of Emergency Teleport in today's format. Like,
kind of, yeah.
We kind of use it now as a synchro material or a disruption through Ghost Ogre. So, like, it's kind of like gone full circle a little bit.
Yeah, I'm using it to summon Crabons. I don't know about you guys.
I'm using it to summon a non-punk Xiamen.
Exactly.
I don't know.
But
crazy.
It's one of those cards that hasn't been power crept. I would say a lot of the reason to do with that would be the fact it's also a quick play, which is huge. Like
quick play is very
good.
interesting
You
in
can
terms
chain
of
it
design.
to, like, Shadow Schism. You can, like, chain it to things that would, like, lock you out and, like, maybe emptiness and stuff like that.
Emptiness,
bypass some of the
summon
problems that
limit.
would cause.
It's just like, oh, no, I'll just vomit it out one more time. Like it is the quick play aspect of it is, I think, something that hasn't been replicated. I think that's truly something that probably can't be redone.
No.
And if not, it has been maybe imitated in cards like Live Twin
one
Home.
quick play?
It is a quick play, but
that
you
one's a
must
quick play.
discard a card.
And it locks you into
Evil Twins.
So it is actually, like, a lot. You can't just play it.
It's imitated, not replicated.
The other one I would say would be Drytron Nova.
Yep.
But not a quick play.
And once per turn.
Once per turn.
Yeah.
So,
And
like,
destroy. Oh yeah, it does destroy. Just like how
They've learned
E-Tele
their
vanishes.
lesson, and I think the reason E-Tele is allowed to be at 3 right now is because there isn't currently a deck that it natively goes +1 with. It's a net neutral. Like, Punk does go +1, but it's not very strong. Cosmo goes +1, but it's not very strong. Virtual, it is not a +1. It's, in fact, just a net neutral.
I think I can see it going again.
Yeah, I think the minute
I
they print a
think-
deck that can go, like, +1 as a generic engine.
I even think in current format, like, look at some of the top lists, and like lots of people are back on triple Emergency Teleport as an engine now.
I mean, that may just be because it's, like, off the list.
It
like,
might
right
be.
now.
It might be people just
Might be the flavor of the month.
It might be, but the fact Halka Fibrax is still around, I think, is the reason.
It kind of feels like Jet Synchron too, where it's just like, or tuning.
Yeah,
where,
tuning was a good example of like, oh, they're gonna hit tuning or jet synchron because it's 4 and 6 copies.
Remember when we all thought they were going to hit tuning and like they hit Jet Synchron instead?
And everyone's like, that's the correct one. But I mean, like,
Maybe
there's also the TCG exclusive archetype Libramancers that are debuting in Battle of Chaos, and they all trigger off special summon, or at least Geek Boy does.
It's funny when Konami like notices a card is broken and then goes like, let's just push it a little bit, because they've printed 3 major psychic level 3 based archetypes in the last few years, and now they've put E-Tele to 3. So they're very much going like, let's just see how far we can push. You know, it felt like they were doing that with Tenki. You know, we got Ancient Warriors and then Tri Brigades and all this other like tri-type support, and then they were just like, Tenki can go to 1 now. You know, we've pushed Tenki as far as it can go.
I mean, people were clamoring for that to go during Lunar Light Xyz format. They were like, you need to put Tinky to 1 because 6 copies of Tiger is too strong.
But I think what broke it is the double Dragon Lord's Link plus Tri Brigade plus, you know, Zodiac.
Tinky Barrage was an FTK.
But then also the fact that it was a send for the double Dragon Lords. Like, it just always felt so broken that it was a free card. Anyway, we're getting off track because there's too many Tenkis and Rotors and stuff. But you're right that E-Tele was like,
E-Tele was huge.
it bypassed special summon as being special.
Yes.
I think that's like the major defining factor of that card.
Yeah. I guess I'll go with my other one, which was Effect Veiler.
Yeah, I mean, we just had the conversation about Ash Blossom, but
very
Effect
similar to
Veiler
that, yeah.
was the first of its kind.
This is the first, like, borderline auto-include hand trap. I mean, it's funny, it didn't see, like, massive amounts of play when it came out.
No.
Yeah, I think Effect Veiler is interesting. Obviously, reads during your opponent's main phase. You can discard a card. You can discard it to the grave to target one effect monster on the field and negate its effects.
Yep,
So,
simple effect.
Simple effect, just an effect negation. It is really unique in its design for the time being. Duelist Revolution was obviously quite a very powerful set, which is where this card debuted. And it almost felt like Effect Veiler was like a test subject for how on board, like off-turn interaction could be portrayed.
Well, fun fact, in the anime, it is used by Yusei to stop an FTK.
You know what? Still true to this day.
It almost feels like because of that, they had in mind, like, I think like this is Drev is around Frog FTK era.
It's just gone, actually.
It's just happened.
Yeah.
And it almost, I mean, it can't have been a response to Frog FTK, but it almost feels like they saw that and were just like,
Maybe we need to do something to interrupt players.
decks are getting too fast, right? Like, decks are getting so fast, we need to give players options to have stuff to stop them. And I mean, that has just become the entire game. Like, if any of these cards have been indicative of where the game went, Effect Veiler is 100% like the answer, because
I mean, we had hand traps beforehand.
Yep,
we talked about DD Crow, we talked about Droll and Lockbird.
I think Droll and Lockbird came out just after.
Just after, anyway, yeah.
and so Skullmeister was in
DD
Star
Crow,
Strike Blast.
Same as Droll and Lockbird.
Same as Droll. But like, I guess it was the most generic like hand trap that has kind of pushed on the design of future hand traps. So like, I'd argue that like Ash Blossom is just a souped up kind of version of an Effect Veiler. Like,
Well, I think Ash Blossom is a response to the fact that a lot of cards activate in hand grave and not on field in a way that you can interact with.
And then but I think it changed the way Yu-Gi-Oh was played. I think we even saw last week in the multi-format that like
Really sticking with this bit.
Yeah, no, it was last week. I've grown.
Really?
No, we saw a lot of the decks, like, there was no hand traps. And
Also, there was just no room.
there was no room. And also,
People preferred traps.
in a way, I kind of preferred it where you're playing the board. You're not playing the board and the hand. Like, you play the hand in the way where you need to like be cautious of what's in the hand and you need to work out what's there. But I quite like the Yu-Gi-Oh back in the day where you would summon things and you're like, they're not going to just Effect Veiler this from something I don't know that is there.
Yeah.
Like, so I guess it did shift the way that Yu-Gi-Oh has been played. So now you like do something and you're like, I wonder if they have Ash. I wonder if they have this.
Now you play and you're like, all right, I'm going to do this. It's going to get
probably
Ash.
gonna get
I'm going
Ashed,
to do this. It's going to get Veilered. And then I'm going to do this. Like, that's how your brain goes. Or you're like, I'm going to do this. They're going to Nibiru. But I have follow-up through Nibiru to summon this, get to this. And then, like, it all plays out as you expected.
Yeah.
And that's, like, how you build decks now.
Yes, you play around the interruption, whereas
Well,
like
you play through it. You're just like, it's coming. It's gonna be there.
a good deck plays through it, and I think that's really interesting that's brought up because the existence of Effect Veiler meant that you were dealing with X amount of known quantities on the field plus unknowns in hand. I think Effect Veiler created the concept of unknown interaction.
Or, like, unknown interaction that isn't telegraphed like a trap card is.
Yes,
That's the thing. You're set 4, you're like, oh, they've probably got...
probably a trap there.
Yeah, you're like, oh, it's probably a Mirror Force, could be a Bottomless, could be a Solemn Warning.
Like, when I pendulumed into back row today, I was very cautious about like not just giving up my whole entire... Like, I wouldn't...
Yeah.
I would pen 2 and be safe. Like, because if I get warned, I lose the game because I have nothing left in my extra deck. So you can't just go like full out because you know that one of those things is a trap. Whereas like these days, like, you play into hand traps and you're like, oh, if this is that.
Yeah.
But sometimes I don't
want to play in the gamma and then they Lancia you. Like, it's a lot harder to know because hand traps vary so much and traps generally do the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really changed how Yu-Gi-Oh is like formed around it.
So pretty much you now play the opposition's hand rather than
kind of.
Yeah.
So once you beat their hand, they can't beat your board.
Exactly.
There's no way a hand beats a board unless they've got 5 board breakers in their hand these days.
Yeah, and I guess obviously what carried on from Effect Veiler's legacy was infinite impermanence.
Yeah,
that's absolutely
even better. Yeah.
It just basically, I think that card got announced and I was like, oh, Effect Veiler's gone, and it's not, and it's crazy.
Play all 6.
You just play all 6 because it is that powerful.
And not to mention, Effect Veiler is a tuner.
Yes, it is a level 1 spellcaster light tuner.
For some reason, make like most hand traps
tuners.
Great levels and tuners, which is silly because
It's ridiculous.
the amount of times I've comboed with Ash is illegal. Like, it should not be allowed. And
And that kind of almost goes back to the emergency teleport thing. Like, Ogre is a tuner, and it's a hand
Yeah.
trap. Like,
it's
and
a hand
it can
trap, it's
activate
extension.
on field as well.
It's
Yes.
disruption during your opponent's turn on field.
Yeah.
It's a tuner. It makes Hulk. It does too much.
It is.
And then we had one more, I think, because you also brought up, I think we were talking about like broken, like any two monsters makes Hulk,
Yes,
Verte, stuff
yeah.
like that. You mentioned Exoton, and I said, well, we have to go back.
To
Black Rose Dragon.
yeah.
Board breakers.
And I think-
Board wipes.
Board breakers,
wipes, yeah.
or like, I guess you could extend it into like extra deck win cons, where they very much feel like, I'm going to get to this, and then the game is over.
I like maybe not so much win cons, but neutralizers.
Yeah. So now we have Zeus, and I think this is like the perfect example of like what we expect removal to look like. Obviously,
Yeah.
Black Rose was like fairly balanced. It wipes the whole board, right?
Including itself.
Including itself.
I think
Then you
that's
get
Exoton.
Exoton
Yeah.
doesn't wipe itself, and it stays on the field with one more legal activation.
And your opponent just doesn't take damage for the rest of the turn.
Yeah.
And
you
it's
need to
also conditional.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you needed to be really wary in those formats of, wait, am I in Exoton range here? Because
Yeah.
like, you had to like count your cards and be like, okay.
It's such a blowout.
Oh
if you
dear, if
get,
I get Exoton right now, I need to literally reduce how many cards I'm on,
yeah, for
otherwise
sure.
I lose the game.
It's like MST your own back row, so they
Yeah,
can't
yeah.
wipe your whole field.
Yeah, so it changed it. So like Black Rose, obviously being the first one, was a very fair board wipe. You know, a
Yeah.
level 7 synchro that killed everything.
You have to commit 2 monsters to make a monster that then wipes the board.
Yeah.
Like, that's a lot of resources.
And then we saw, and it definitely has
Yeah.
stepped up each one. Exoton, wipes the board, doesn't.
Yeah.
It doesn't just win you the game straight away,
No.
but it often can.
But also the fact that it's like normal Altair, summon to Neb, search, Exoton, board wipe.
Then
I
you
normal
follow
summon
up.
I normal summoned one card and wiped the board. That's not a Black Rose, right?
No. And then now we have Zeus, where
Yeah.
Zeus is just next level. It's like Exoton on crack. Like the fact
Yeah.
it can send things to grave as well. Like that's probably another important thing to note is like the move away from
Destruction-based
destruction
removal.
to send and removal. Like
Yeah.
and Zeus being once per like not even once per chain.
Yeah.
Like it's just stupid.
Exoton is actually once per chain.
Yeah.
And I guess what's funny about this is like looking back through all of this, we talked about like Stratos, Tour Guide, E-Telly, cards that have never really been power crept, right? When it comes to extension, when it comes to like searching, Yu-Gi-Oh's actually stayed pretty consistent. Rhoda is just as good now as it was back in the day.
It's just a one.
What gets power crept in Yu-Gi-Oh is not extension, even though Yu-Gi-Oh now we think of as like 12-minute turn, 50 negate combo boards. They haven't actually broken a lot of the old cards, but what they have broken is just how easy it is to get to payoffs
Yep.
and how good the payoffs are.
Yeah.
Like, Atlanteans, back in the day, could have made B-Sav Herald, like, pretty easily. They just didn't have them. It took a lot more resources to make a boss monster, so Yu-Gi-Oh almost has this weird power creep where nothing gets stronger, things just get easier.
Yes.
You know, B-Sav is worse than Cosmo Blazar, but one of them is 2 monsters and the other one is 5 monsters to get to.
Yeah, 100%. Like you put Rota back to free.
37
It's the
cards.
best card in the format. I'll
37
play
cards.
3, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that's
I'll
the
play
thing. Like,
Talonites again.
yeah,
Screw it.
you look at like those, like that's something that I feel like that's a really good indicator of something that's also kind of been indicative is moving, including use once per turn effects.
That is
Like,
true.
that's
that is
a
one thing
good
that
one.
they've...
You think of like, and the hardest restriction for those, even though we've discussed it, it's not really a restriction, is wind-ups once while on the field.
Yeah.
Like you
Well, that
could
one had its problems, but...
that one had its problems, but that was the balancing factor behind it. So okay, I can't just every turn magician summon something from deck.
You have to find a new magician.
You have to find a new magician,
Yeah.
and even something it's like the pantheism. Okay, I can draw discard 1, draw 2, 3 times a turn. I can only banish to search once.
Yeah, yeah.
So like this inclusion of you can only use this effect once per turn. I think that was kind of their answer to power creep.
Yeah.
Like
Well, I like it because it makes hands more predictable. Sometimes you would just like, oh, do I ash the rotor and then have another rotor? Like, that's not very interesting.
do you actually engage? Oh, they've got 2.
It's a lot more interesting when it's like, do I ash emergence? That's once per turn. They can't just show me another emergence. And if their hand has another emergence in it, that's just a dead card now.
Yeah.
I think that does make things more interesting, that things are once per
I
turn.
think it's more fair, and like I think you're right. Like keeping those engine pieces once per turn, as I say, we now get to a better payoff, right? So like the end boards we're putting up now are like, I don't think they are as good as some of the previous end boards we saw maybe about 2 or 3 years ago when it was like
Yeah, for sure.
5-6 Omni negates and you couldn't do anything.
I think a lot of end boards these days aren't as good as Xyz Infernity's end board.
No.
Like, it's so much easier than
Easier
they had to get to
them.
it.
Yeah. There's a lot less steps. The decks are, it's weird. They're built in a more fair way, but are more unfair. It's really weird. Like looking at modern Yu-Gi-Oh at the moment, like I remember Pendulum in Electromite, kind of around TOS format. You could just set up like 6, 7, 8 negates, and there was no Nibiru's, there was no board breakers, there was nothing like that. So I guess in that sense, they've addressed these things. So like things have like moved on in the game, and then now Konami are going, well, we can bring these other things like E-Tele back. And it's going to be really good, but there are now answers to those boards. Yeah.
It's funny, almost what we've unpacked here is that Konami addressed the fact that turns were getting too long and people were ending on unbreakable boards, so they introduced hand traps. And what that did to the game was it made it borderline impossible to get off like the Magical Christmas combos, like Xyz Infernity did back in 2014. Like you could never get away with that now.
No.
Because there's just so many things to address it.
You could barely get away with it when 2019 came out. Yeah,
Well, like with Valor and stuff like that. So like what they did then was they go, okay, now no one can build combo decks because they're so fragile.
Yeah.
So they made it easier to make payoffs.
Yeah.
And now that's why we're here, is that like because they had such degenerate combo decks, they made answers, and because the answers were so strong, they made easier combos. So now we're back kind of where we started, where it's like the combo decks aren't degenerate. Like Sword Soul isn't degenerate.
No.
Tri-Brigade isn't degenerate, but they're making boards as good as the decks that were considered that bad back in the day.
Yeah.
And they can play through multiple hand traps.
I think like you talk about this, like if you put Xyz Infernity into today's format,
Full
I
power.
just don't
think it hangs.
I don't know.
it doesn't hang.
I don't think it can get through the hand traps.
No.
Like I barely think Dragon Rulers hangs. Like
No, it doesn't.
Probably not. No. Like looking at it today, like I was like,
you're like, wow, all your big boss monsters are once per turn, and the most you're doing is putting up maybe 2 Xyz.
But also, their activation requirements are too specific.
Yeah.
yeah.
Like,
I guess the
it
thing
seems
is,
crazy to say that because they're so generic. But
I
like,
guess the
you
thing
have to-
is they would just become part of the Dragon Link deck.
and that's what everything is
Which
now,
is what it would
nowadays,
be,
right?
yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
all
You look
the
at-
Burning Abyss and Phantom Knight cards in PK are just kind of slapped in there
Yes.
as part of a link spam engine. They're not really played for
serve their
Phantom Knight
purpose
reasons,
anymore,
right?
yeah.
Like, you don't actually make the archetypal boss monsters. You barely use the archetypal spells and traps, you know.
Yeah, that's the thing
Fogblade,
is
that's
that
it.
we're looking at new cards that come out and immediately analyze how strong
Yeah.
are they on their own, how strong are they with other things. So what we're looking at is synergy or standalone. And I think that that's kind of where, you know, that's how the game has progressed going forward, is it's no longer been like, this is a fun tech option. We look for how good does this work in singularity and how good does this work in tandem.
We've kind of come back full circle to Adventures, actually.
Yeah.
After this whole discussion, is like, Adventures feels like an archetype designed by someone who really likes invoked and
Isekai.
hand traps and like engines, because the archetype has no legs on its own. It's obviously been designed as like armor for another deck, you know? It's like, this is the accessory that you stick onto your car that isn't actually going to make the thing run. It's just there to make it look cool and do extra stuff.
Well, it's actually more like putting like a big like a ram bar on the front.
Look, I don't drive. Girl, I don't drive.
No, you know, it's like putting
Yeah.
even like, for example, like a spike on the front of your car
Yeah,
to
or like
penetrate through
snow
to
tires or
like,
whatever,
allow
like-
it to push through. You
It's
know,
just an
like, yeah,
accessory.
yeah,
It's not
it
like an
is,
actual
yeah.
deck. And so many archetypes nowadays are unpacked like accessories,
Well, we
not
look
decks.
at DPE engine still like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, Destroy Phoenix Force got announced, and we went,
This is good.
Yeah.
This deck,
Everything,
this deck, you know,
Even Dogmatica has been kind of
Yeah.
treated like
it's an engine.
accessories. It's not a deck. And
guess
yeah, that is kind of how Yu-Gi-Oh! Has progressed after we've gone from degeneracy to hand traps to combo decks that can resiliency through hand traps. And now we've just settled on the fact that, like, if my deck's just a bunch of good stuff, it's like we're playing goats again. It's like, my deck's just all good stuff, then I'll be able to make some kind of board, and my opponent's deck is just going to be all good stuff, and they probably can't break it with just the good stuff.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
it shows that it has gone almost like full circle.
Kind of, yeah. And and again, like Goat, there's just like 20 cards that appear in every main deck.
Yeah.
Ash, Imperm, Right, Water Enchantress, Griffin Rider, Draco back.
E-Tele
That's like
now.
E-Tele.
that's like
Yeah,
15
yeah.
cards gone, and then
Yeah.
the rest of the deck is just fill in the blanks, color in.
I mean, it
you
was the
have.
most chronic. Like, you know, you think about it, like, you do get to a point when you look at deck building, you go, 20 engine, 20 hand traps. 20 engine, 20 interruption. And it's just
It's starting to feel that way.
It is just exactly how that feels. And it's like, okay, how can I mitigate any inclusion of the Garnet?
And I think the only reason that would ever change now is if Konami goes, most hand traps banned, most board breakers banned, most combo cards banned. You know what I mean?
The
Like,
engine cards are gone as well.
it's like Hulk, Verte, Auroradon, Celine, everything has to go.
Your petition to ban dual overload.
Yeah. I think ban dual overload, ban Isolde, Cherubini,
TPE.
DPE, it's
Fusion
kind of
Destiny.
Fusion Destiny, everything. Ban Ash, ban Vela, ban Imperm, ban Nibiru, ban
but then-
Dark Ruler. And then it's like, then we can play decks that are greedy but have punishments and like aren't necessarily resilient. Like you can maybe keep some of the hand traps, but I think what it is just like, if you ban all the combo pieces, then everyone just plays 25 hand traps plus some kind of normal summon engine.
No,
I think-
they play Eldritch.
Yeah, well, exactly. They're like a trap deck, right?
What-
Yeah.
But then
one
with like a
of
bunch of hand traps in it. And then like if
Yeah.
you ban all the hand traps, everyone just plays like hand loop, right?
One, I guess it's a combination of cards that kind of changed the way everything was going at the time. Was Nibiru and Dark Ruler when they first came out.
That's a huge modern
Like,
one, yeah.
that was huge. Like that was
Because
right,
there was
now we can't
nothing.
just freely do anything.
There was nothing that punished overextension once Maxi left, and there was nothing that mass negated without a huge cost. I think at all. I don't actually believe there was anything that was just like
Nothing non-archetypal.
exactly. And that's the thing is you think of Nibiru absolutely combo color. That was what it was called when it got announced. And it was like this is a combo color, and then Dark Ruler said combo. This is a combo color. This is a ball breaker.
And I think contrary to what I've said about hand traps, I actually quite like Nibiru. And I like it because it rewards good deck building. I don't necessarily love that it results in every deck being Verte pass, but it kind of does. I think if Verte goes, then decks have to be more creative about how they play around the concept of Nibiru if they want to get those combo end boards. You know, definitely Adamantipator could play through it. Infernoble could play through it. And I think those were decks that, despite being degenerate and needing some ban list hits, demonstrated that deck building can be more interesting than what I think is now like just Verte Turbo featuring an engine. Sometimes.
Much, yeah. I mean, look at what happened to Drytron now. They got rid of Eva.
Yeah.
It's literally just a DPE plus a side.
Yeah, it's so boring.
I'm sad. I wanted to play like a cool build.
I want to play rituals, and instead you end on 2 link
I'm like,
monsters
oh, dumb.
and a fusion.
Yeah.
It's so
Yeah,
stupid.
2 links and a fusion. Thank you very much.
And an effect monster with 2200 attack.
Yeah. Whoa, scary. I guess my interesting thing is, what do you think is a keyword or kind of a key phrase that you'd like to see printed more? Like, is there kind of like an action that a card could do that, or something that you could
One that I don't want to see more of is cards like a Super Poly. But
can't respond?
respond.
you cannot respond. Yeah, those
Yeah.
ones are very uninteractive. That's actually a card that you could probably almost see.
I would like to see more cards like Cleafort Stealth, I think. And less cards that are like, you can't play, but more cards that you can creatively chain together and use like the Yu-Gi-Oh! Chain link system as a mechanic to bypass hand traps. Like, I really liked using Access Code to like link off a Block Dragon so you could protect the search. Like, I think that's fun and rewards good playing because it's not necessarily obvious. Like, one that came up in a match was Almirage's on like normal summoned monster destruction effect can return. And Dino pointed out to me I could have beaten him by crashing Nerval, going Chainlink 1 Nerval, Chainlink 2 Almirage. Like stuff like that really gets me excited about Yu-Gi-Oh! And I think the funnest games I've had have been when that has come up as a relevant mechanic. So
Yeah, I mean, I had that exact same thing. I was playing Striker, and I had a Hornet Drones and a spell on field, and I said, and it was like, activate the third spell or to activate the other spell to put the third spell in grave, and they went, oh, attack with Conquistador or going for game, and I just went, Hornet Drones in defense, it's now 1500. Like, you just, like, the secondary effects of cards is just it's such an interesting way to design.
I guess I like modality and I like chain blocking. I think those are probably ways that Yu-Gi-Oh! Can go that make hand traps less of an auto win and make it less necessary to have cards like Cross Out and Called By, which I think are fundamentally really boring cards.
Yeah.
And make it more fun to be like, I can choose how to chain like this. Like, as annoying as Sword Soul is, Moye and Chi Zhao is a fun...
Yeah.
You actually get to choose, do I want the draw or do I want the add to be protected?
I like it too. I mean, I used to like playing that flip fusion deck that you would summon something from sending materials from deck, and you could order your chain links, and it definitely was like a, I love chain blocking. Like I'm with you there. I like it when you like, choose exactly the right chains, knowing that your opponent cannot do anything about it, but like it rewards you for being like
proactive about
good enough player to be like, well, I don't want you to stop this. This is important. This is going to win me the game.
Yeah.
And you kind of order them in like, you can stop that if you want.
Yeah, this is the least important for me.
And I very much pick out good players by them doing this.
Absolutely.
Like
chain linking and chain blocking, I think is a fundamental skill to increase your ability to succeed in a competitive environment.
I think even like back in Pendulum times, when it's like, kind of chain blocking your electromite so they couldn't ogre it, and like sometimes you have an effect on field to search, an effect on engrave to search, and you're like, well, I want the effect engrave less, so I'm going to chain block it so that that's chain link 2, but if I make the on field one chain link 2, then that can be ogred, and like there are considerations around different hand traps too, and they veil you and it didn't matter. But
I quite like the other interactions as well, like when someone dark rulers you and you can like activate something yourself and then respond to that card, like it's kind of cool. Like,
I mean, like before that was like Night Beam.
Yeah,
it's like, okay, if you target a card that I can't respond to, but I've got chainable back row, it's like chain, so you get to play around that interaction.
What I would like printed more are hand traps that say when your opponent does something, I think is what I'm saying, because I think a lot of hand traps, Nibiru, Vela, Imperm, Lazia, Droll, are all so chainable that it makes playing around them less fun. Like you can't really play around Vela, you can't really play around Imperm. Like you can play cards that beat those cards, but you can't play around them. I think they should print more Ghost Girls that like act like Ash or like
Bell.
We've talked a long time about how there should be one that can negate activating from deck or
banish from deck,
activate from deck.
Yeah,
like the cards that are missing from Ash. Not to advocate for more hand traps, because I think we've got enough, but more hand traps like Ash that you can maybe chain block more creatively around.
Yeah.
And like have more stuff to have in your mind about like, I'm going to play around Ash, not this, or this, not Ash, and like weigh up those decisions. Because I think Vela's boring. Like ultimately Vela just happens no matter what you do.
Imperm happens no matter what. Yeah.
Yeah. I agree.
I think.
Do you have something?
I think the can't respond is probably the most interesting. Like there's
something Joe wanted gone.
Yeah.
I think just as
it's lazy, yeah.
Really interesting.
Is very lazy card building.
Droplet is ultimately kind of lazy as well. Yeah. Like it's a necessary evil, but like it becomes this question of like, well, if they have Droplet plus Trap, then they beat me, and like sometimes they do, and most of the time they don't.
I think but the printing of can't or your opponent can activate cards or effects in response is super interesting. Like their quote unquote spell speed 4, unofficial, is something I don't know if like I think that has actually changed how a lot of people play.
So there's nothing you would want printed more in terms of like
tough.
Yu-Gi-Oh?
I think I really enjoy the Sky Striker mechanic of something. Then if X has been fulfilled,
I do think
something
that's a cool
additional
mechanic,
occurs.
Kowloon, Cross Sheep, those kind of effects.
Well, or Cross Sheep's interesting because it's more defined in sequence. So it's like do something. It's like apply the following effects.
But how you can like Cross Sheep and then like you could theoretically like chain a reborn spell, summon, and then like on res Cross Sheep will still get you the effect that you want.
I think a cool idea would be like almost a Sky Striker trap deck where you get rewarded for traps engraved, like an extra bonus effects. Like bonus effects is what a really cool idea. Like,
I think that's a fun mechanic.
Like, however many cards banished you have, like you get extra things for those, like of those certain cards. I think it makes for an interesting deck. Like Sky Striker, it's a skill to get those 3 into the grave, and then also having the knowledge of the secondary effects is a skill in itself as well. So
I guess what we're asking for in terms of the trajectory of Yu-Gi-Oh! Is not to like undo all the changes that have been made, but to find play patterns within what we currently have now that we can still make decisions that resemble what we do in like 2014 format. Like in 2014 format, the concept of like, oh, I'll compulse my Flying Sea on your field so that like you can't pop it and then I can summon it back. That's like an interaction it'll never happen now. Like we'll never have minute interactions on a grand scale happening frequently like that happens in like old format. But we still get to have interactions like chain blocking your graveyard effects, and we still get to have interactions like, you've said like you can Droplet send a spell in response to engage to negate their monster, and then on resolution it checks there's 3 engraved. Like that's a really cool thing that happened. yeah, I think we need more stuff like that. And I guess droplet is fun sometimes when you like evenly matched and then you droplet send and it can't chain with a trap or something. Like there are fun interactions there too, but
Yeah.
more cards like that would be fun.
Yeah, I think all in all, like the game has really progressed, obviously, from vanilla beats to many different facets throughout its entirety.
I was going to bring up that Stratos was the evolution of like Breaker, was like the previous best normal.
Because it was removal.
Yeah, like removal went.
And
to
guess what? Stratos is search or removal. So
yeah, we overlooked that
yeah.
talking about Stratos, and it is
true,
also
true.
Breaker.
It's also a modal. Yeah, it's also a modal.
If you play heroes.
Yeah, and I think that that's, quite an interesting concept. Just like the way that throughout history we've seen the evolution of cards and effects and how they've impacted going forward the designs in current days. Like, one thing that we don't have to get too far deep in is just the concept of field spells. That's like
that's like a whole other podcast.
That whole other
yeah.
podcast.
That's a whole
it's
other
like,
thing, yeah.
there's so many iterations of so many different effects, designs. It's really fascinating. And I mean, I look forward to seeing what else they can design, coming into Tactical Masters, which is supposed to be releasing in June, and here, like, a pendulum archetype that likes its things being as continuous spells in the spell trap zone.
Making fun of like how pendulum monsters are continuous spells, but in the pen zone they don't count as continuous spells. They're pendulum spells, and like fun fact, like I'll put my pendulum monster in the continuous spell zone now. It's not in the pen zone. It's very funny.
Yeah, like that's a cool, unique mechanic that I think is underutilized. And
I do think they're playing with stuff like that in
think
fun
that's
ways.
kind of where the breaking mechanic thing came in.
Yeah, I mean, like, we talked about Zodiac, but like Exorcisters and Grand Creators are conditional Zodiacs.
Yes. Not to mention the fact that like if you look at Genesis Impact, Drytron have ritual with levels attack instead of levels. Magistus equip extra deck monsters from the extra deck to themselves, and then you have Ancient Guardians messed with synchro.
The minus levels, the level
minus
differences.
levels to synchro instead of add levels to synchro.
And then Sulfur's cared about the
numbers,
scales, your scale numbers.
It does feel like Konami's realized that Aurora into BSAB is boring as hell, even though they refuse to ban that card. They've realized that what's fun about Yu-Gi-Oh! Is like the stupid kinds of flavor that we get. And I think a lot of the most fan favorite decks in history have been very flavorful decks. Like,
creative, yeah.
Hero decks are about gathering a bunch of heroes together with like a bunch of search abilities and spamming them to the field.
VA is literally you're traveling through hell.
Yeah, traveling through hell. So they go to grave and they come back. Like there's so many fun like archetypes that have used like the mechanics. Even Cleaforts, as disgusting as they were.
Big mean machines.
Unfeeling monstrosity, like machines full of evil that would just like show up and like sit there and you couldn't do anything to them because they were giant machines is like perfect flavor.
Yeah, and I think that the way that they've all been designed is something that has kind of traversed through history, and may just be we see sprinklings of them all around in the current format. So I think that it's really cool seeing all these designs, and I guess here's to the future. Yeah, here's to more unique
from Noah's Ark in Palmy.
Yeah,
1 week locked in.
Yeah. It's
hopefully you'll get home soon.
Yeah,
the only way to get us home is if you like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. Send us questions to thefacedowns@gmail.com. That's thefacedowns@gmail.com, and we can get around to them on podcasts like this.
Yeah. Again, if you have a question, if you think there's something that changed the format, or if you think that there's something that we missed out, we'd love to know.
We would.
And we are standing by and having fun recording in person. It's been a long time since we've been able to do this.
Also, keep your eyes peeled, I'd say, on the Facebook page, because we did mention a giveaway that
we've been mentioning it for about 20 episodes now.
Yeah, we have, but I believe we
77 subscribers.
Yeah, so we're either going for the 100 subscribers, and
we will have a giveaway for 100 subscribers.
What we really want is it to be for our 50th episode, which I believe is the next one.
We would love to have it for our 50th episode, so if you can share the podcast, just literally get people to make new YouTube accounts and click subscribe. It would mean a lot to us.
So we are looking forward to doing the big 50. Current live count, we're at 79 subscribers. So 21 more
79.
people. 79.
That's 2 more.
Woo! I know. So two more
Wait, did we
people.
get Skeggs the link? Get Skeggs the link. That could be 80. Subscribe.
But yeah, so please give us a follow, like, comment, subscribe, and we look forward to doing a giveaway at 100 subscribers on YouTube. And as always, thank you so much for listening. I'm Ruben.
I'm Lucas.
And I'm Joe.
And you've been listening to The Face Downs.
Oh, we did a good one. Oh, thank God.
I had to do one.
How do people do this for 3 hours? My voice is like shot.
I'm living.
Oh, no, that was good.
I sound like an old.
Let's do another one.
Yeah, fuck it.
And episode 50. It's been 2 weeks now.
All right, the giveaway is
giveaway
I'm
is,
gonna go to bed on live stream.
The giveaway is
My soiled underwear from sitting here for too long.
haven't had any subscribers in 2 weeks.
I'll go and find the hot tub water that they all sell.
Yeah. They should have sold the water. I'll sell some face down bath water.
Hot tub.
A little bit.